We've talked about two of the four P's, product decisions and pricing decisions. The next two that we talk about, placement and promotion, will actually seem a lot more familiar to you. The terminology is not necessarily new. The concepts are not necessarily new because after all, you have been shoppers all your life. But please don't dismiss it and think that there's nothing to be learned. You do need to make sure that you understand differences in terms of types of channel members. There's a lot of change going on between bricks and mortar and clicks and quicks and all kinds of things like that. And they're just as important as understanding product and price. But I do guarantee you that most of you will find learning about placement and promotion is a little bit easier. And this is a part of the course where, man, get that Learn Smart going. Because there is a lot of terminology, there are a lot of definitions. Work your Learn Smart as much as possible. As we look at placement and think about what it means, I have to tell you that this is, of the four P's, this is the one that has probably changed more than anything else over the course of time, and it actually has gone all the way to the right, all the way to the left, and kind of back again. Originally, it was referred to as physical distribution. And if you were taking a class in a commerce degree, which you might have been taking at, say, Berkeley in 1900, or at many other schools in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, we at San Diego State didn't yet have a College of Business, so you wouldn't have been taking it here. But you would have definitely have studied physical distribution. And then in the 1970s to the 1990s, the whole concept of physical distribution was really substantially minimized. Because in the old days, this was physical distribution. This was the packing of goods. This was the logistics and the supply chain input part of all of this. And it would go to a very simple Main Street retailer. Lots and lots of things have changed. And one of the things that changed between the 1970s and the 1990s was that by the 70s, most companies had figured out how to actually be efficient as they possibly could at distributing their goods, physically distributing their goods. Up to that point in time, back in the old days, you could have a real competitive advantage if you could pack a box, deliver a box 10 minutes faster and for 20 cents less. What has happened since then is a huge revolution in a lot of other peripheral areas that we in business deal with. Today we look at this whole process of supply chain management and logistics in a much bigger way and a much more significant way than we ever did with just placement and physical distribution. It involves all of your channel decisions. How are we selling? Through whom are we selling? It involves your information systems, and above all, distribution efficiency is key. So we went from it being really critical to, for about 20 years, it wasn't such a big deal, to now it's really critical. And in fact, when we look at what happens with distribution and how automated it is and how mechanical it is, there are still some times when you need to get the forklift in there and lift the crate out. But I love this picture. This is, I think this is a UPS picture. It might be a Walmart warehouse picture. But what you have here is you and I cannot actually see the other end of these roller inputs. These boxes are all automatically coded by their UPC codes, sorted, and pushed out the other end of the facility. In this entire facility, you see one guy. Remember back there when we were packing those crates? It was a really different world. And I tell you this because this is a secret in marketing. Many of you kind of like logistics, kind of like MIS. This is a great place to end up. Can you imagine if you were the logistics manager at Amazon and you negotiated a deal that for every 1/100th of a cent you can reduce on the delivery cost of every item that Amazon sells, you get a bonus. I actually tell people, many times people come through and they're, as an undergrad, and they're very much focused on marketing, and this is where they want to go. That's fine. I'm a marketing professor. I love it. Although my job is not to convert you all to marketing. My God, we need accountants and finance people and all that as well. But maybe you graduate and you get a job in marketing. And after you're out for 2 or 3 years, you realize, I think I really need an MBA. Come back and focus on MIS, on logistics. Or if you graduate and you get a job in logistics and you learn how these things get distributed, then go out and work for a while, come back in 2 or 3 years and focus on marketing. That combination, which is an odd combination, is actually one of the real keys and real successful places to be. It's not for all of you, but for a lot of you, I may have just tapped on something that you guys have never thought about. When we look at the channels of distribution and we break down this old school channels of distribution concept and look at logistics and supply chain management, what we're doing here is sort of 2 different parts, although they're very closely related, and in many ways they use a lot of the same management information systems, many of those which you learn in 360 and a lot of other classes as well. If we're looking at logistics, this is the whole process of moving the goods from to the final consumer from the original sources. So you have a factory that's making products. How do they actually get it to the final consumer as fast as possible and as cheaply as possible? The other side of this coin is supply chain management, and this tends to be a little bit more on the manufacturing end, equally as important. It does apply to retailers as well. How do they match inventory to demand? Because there are 2 issues you run into all the time when you are managing supply chains. One is a stock out, and the other one is an oversupply. If you have an oversupply of 24, you know you have an oversupply of 24, and you get in trouble for it, and it costs you a lot of money. If you have a stock out, you have no idea how many people wanted your product. Those are equally as important. And we put this all together in this channel. And again, it's called the channel of distribution because it's almost like a long canal going from the manufacturer of raw materials to the final consumer. There are quite a few decisions that you have to make, and I really stress that you have to make. Because probably of all of the 4 Ps, this is the area where managers are the least likely at the outset, at the beginning of the company, to sit down and make conscious decisions. This is one, not to be impolite, but you all probably know that expression, that it happens. That's kind of what happens here with a lot of companies. You're a small entrepreneur, you're 3 people starting out in the business, and you don't really sit down and logically figure this out. You're worried about price, you're worried about getting the product manufactured, and that's about all there is. But you actually have to deal with these issues, and you have to make a cogent set of decisions. The first one has to do with push versus pull. This is an issue that will come back around again when we talk about IMC. It's a very simple concept. It's a very big decision. Are you going to push the product through the channel onto the consumer? Or are you going to market to the consumer and have him pull the product through the channel? It is, again, a decision that you should not let just happen. You should make the decision. Within the trade, you might decide to push. And this means I'm going to spend a lot of my money, a lot of my resources, working on all the channel members. It might be wholesalers, it might be distributors, it might be retailers, to try and get them to focus on my product. So if I'm Samsung selling refrigerators, I want the folks at Best Buy, I want the folks at Fry's, the folks at Sears, JCPenney's, everybody who sells refrigerators. I'm going to give them incentives. Maybe I give them spiffs. Maybe I give them some kind of special compensation. Maybe I give the stores some really nice displays and some nice videos that will help to push the Samsung refrigerator. That means that I'm spending a lot of money at this end of the channel. An example would be, for instance, and Apple does this a lot of times, they have a lot of different meetings, and they have user meetings, they have press meetings, and they also have developer meetings, and they treat their developers pretty well. They wine them and they dine them, they give them gift cards, because They want developers developing Apple products and making products that are really good, because that way they can kind of push some of these things that are so nice and so user-friendly through the channels. On the other hand, there's a pull strategy. And a pull strategy says, I'm not spending a lot on the channel. I'm going to assume it's going to get through the channel. And in more recent times, when channels have gotten fairly short, as we saw when we talked about pricing, and there's been a lot of disintermediation, maybe I take my money and I go to the consumers. I'll tell you an industry where this has happened a lot in probably the last 50 years. In the old days, insurance, the insurance industry, life insurance, fire insurance, certainly car insurance, the insurance companies like Travelers and Geico and Aflac and Progressive, they spent huge amounts of money back here on the push, on the insurance agents. But today, they spend most of their money on you. So you see the Geico Gecko, or some of the other really funny, and Geico does have some really funny ads. Or you see Flo. Most recently, I've been hearing Flo with her Flowetry. Or you see the Allstate guy with the deep voice. That's a pull strategy. That's a very different strategy from a push strategy. The second thing that you have to think about, and number 2, number 3, and number 4, and I don't have them numbered here, but I trust you guys to count. Okay, they sound like they're the same thing. They're not, but they're very closely related. And so when you make a decision about one, you kind of have to think through the consequences of the other. The second thing is, where are you going to sell it? And at how many places are you going to sell it? What's the number of outlets that you're going to use? Is this going to be a product that is everywhere? And probably one of the things as you were doing Learn Smart exercises and going through the quizzes that sort of baffled you was, okay, I understand intensive distribution, but what the heck is the difference between limited distribution and exclusive distribution? I will agree with you. It is kind of foggy. Extensive distribution is not hard to define. It's everywhere. The product is everywhere. This is something that Coca-Cola realized probably around 2000, maybe 1997 to 2000. Coca-Cola had very good distribution, but in order to penetrate the market and get you and me to drink more Coke, they needed to put those machines almost everywhere. They actually have a whole concept, Coca-Cola does, called points of interruption. And they can tell you in a grocery store how many points of interruption there should be, in a convenience store how many points of interruption. And a point of interruption is when you look around a 7-Eleven or a Circle K, how many places do you see Coca-Cola? Is it the big fountain machine that might dispense both Coke and Pepsi, but the logo on the front is Coke, and the cups that you put it in are Coke? Is it when you look at the refrigerator units and the handles of the doors are Coca-Cola bottles, the plastic bottles? Okay, those are all points of interruption. Part of what Coca-Cola has done is they have decided that if they put it within my arm's reach, dang, I'm going to buy it. And I do. And I want you to look at this because in the next lecture, we're going to talk a little bit about vending machines worldwide. But we're particularly going to talk about vending machines in Japan because Japan is at the top of the heap when it comes to vending machines. Remember, this is a country with limited space. This is a country where everything is terraced. This is one city block, and look at the number of vending machines. And it's kind of hard to tell here, but these are huge vending machines. I mean, these are really, really large in a country that's not particularly large. They rely on vending machines almost as Americans do a garage refrigerator. Some people might say, oh, this is really ruining the view of beautiful Venice with the gondolas. Hey, if I just rode on a gondola in Venice, which I don't because they're too expensive and the river smells too bad, but I might need a Diet Coke. Maybe I am in, actually, I'm not even sure where I am here. I think I'm in Ethiopia. I think this is Ethiopia. Maybe I need a Coke. On this one, you all know this is, I need this at San Diego State badly because after all, we are a Pepsi campus. We went over to the dark side. August 1st, 2006. Moment of silence. Pepsi paid us a $2 million bribe. I'm sorry, gave us a $2 million gift, and we went over to the dark side. I actually have saved a lot of money since then because I now have a big refrigerator in my office and I stock it with Coke, so it's actually a little cheaper. I would love this. And they do this in Japan. They actually, can you imagine how heavy this is? That there's someone in there walking around with as a vending machine. Man, this is exactly what I need. On the other hand, we have limited distribution, and then we have very exclusive distribution. And I promised you, limited distribution in the middle of this between extensive and exclusive, it's very hard to define. Exactly what it is, nobody has numbers. Extensive, it's everywhere. Exclusive, you can kind of count it. And probably one of the best examples of exclusive that I can give you is Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton, this is the mothership, as we looked at when we looked at pricing. This is the store that is near the Spanish Steps in Rome. This is another one that, again, I have to give Louis Vuitton a heck of a lot of credit. As much as I get mad at them for how ridiculously they price their products, they do market extremely, extremely well. They were doing a renovation on this store, so they built a small suitcase in the front. And I don't know if you can tell this or not, but they have as the security guard going into the store a Roman centurion, and the Roman centurion is wearing Louis Vuitton leather. It's really well done. In the whole world, there's 460 stores. Louis Vuitton does not sell at Walmart. Louis Vuitton does not sell at Target. Louis Vuitton does not sell at Macy's. There are a few select Bloomingdale's and I think Neiman Marcus where they lease a department within the store. But overall, it's a handful of stores. Okay, it is extremely, extremely exclusive. And that's how they, in part, control the products that they so carefully produce and how they control the price. The third thing you have to think about is, well, what kind of places am I going to sell them at? And how many of them? Am I going to sell upscale? Am I going to go downscale? Am I going to market my product in the swap meet? There's a certain je ne sais quoi that you do not have if you were selling at the swap meet. Am I going to sell at Long's Drugs? I think those are now all owned by CVS. Am I going to sell at Forever 21? It's kind of a mid-range store. If we think about a shopping mall, a strip mall like this, wow, this is a really kicking shopping mall. It's got Kmart, Dollar General, Big Lots, and a pawn shop. Or am I going to go to Saks? Am I going to go to Saks Fifth Avenue and sell my product? And probably the ultimate mid-range is the department store. We don't have as many department stores left as we used to. Robinsons bought the May Company. Then Macy's bought Robinsons May. And Macy's bought Bullock's. So Macy's is actually what used to be 4 different stores. We still have Nordstrom. We still have Dillard's, but we don't have a lot. And Macy's and Dillard's and even Nordstrom, these are very mid-range kinds of stores, as you will see when we talk about some of the changes in retail behavior in the next lecture. The fourth thing that you have to think about is, what is the sequence? I talked to you about this once before when we talked about targeting different market segments. The thing that I often find with managers, especially entrepreneurs, they know exactly who they're going for first. And they've never thought about the second. They've never thought about the alternatives. And you have to think about, am I starting low and going high? Am I starting in the middle and going up and then going down? What's your approach? Historically, the sequence was that you started high and you did a trickle down. You'd started at Neiman Marcus, you'd started at Tiffany's, and eventually over time, you would actually let this all trickle down. Today, there's been kind of a reversal. There's a lot of companies in the last 10 to 15 years who start at the low end. And there's a very few types of products that are lower end at the outset than infomercials, although infomercials have also somewhat gone upscale. So if we look at infomercials for the Snuggie and the Snuggie for dogs, because after all, when your dog is sitting on the sofa reading a book, he might get cold. I do want you to remember a couple of facts about the Snuggie. There have been over 30 million sold. And once again, think if they just made $1 on each one. And selling them at $19.99, you know they're making more than $1. They have brought in more than $500 million on Snuggies. And there was recently a decision, I think it actually went all the way to the Supreme Court, because it has sleeves. It was being considered clothing. And the Snuggie people took it to court and said, no, we're a blanket. We just happen to be a blanket with sleeves. And the courts finally decided it is a blanket. It's a blanket with sleeves. And you might say, what the heck is the difference? It's a very big difference when you're importing it from China and it's a garment or a blanket. The way that it comes in and the way that it gets taxed is radically different. And they were successful.
Cozy up this winter with the Slanket. It's a gigantic fleece blanket with sleeves. This soft, lightweight, but warm fleece blanket has large, loose sleeves designed to give you freedom of movement while you keep your entire body covered and comfortable. Use it while reading, working at your computer, or watching television. In fact, you'll find endless places to cover up this winter with the soft, fleecy warmth of the Slanket.
And I give you the Slanket. Most of you have probably not heard of it. You've really only heard of the Snuggie. The Snuggie kind of preempted the Slanket. Slanket was the first one, and I tell you about this one because I want you guys all to think out of the box. This was two freshmen at the University of Maine who had a room at the end of the hall. They slept in bunk beds in a small room, and it was freezing cold. And they had a TV, and the guy on the bottom was the one who had the remote, the bottom bunk. And sometimes when he wanted to change the channel, he would try and change the channel through the blanket, and the remote wouldn't, the light wouldn't go through the blanket. So he took a scissor and he cut a hole in the blanket so the lazy bum could actually change the channel. Then he took the blanket home at Christmas to have his mom wash it. Again, the lazy bum. She yelled at him for cutting a hole in it. He explained to her what the problem was, and she said, well, let's make you a blanket with sleeves, and that was the Slanket. Then again, along came Snuggie, kind of copied it, and the rest is history. But I suggest to you that what happens with a lot of these infomercial products, and I suspect you've seen them at Target, Walmart, I think to some extent I've even seen them at Vons and Ralph's and even at Costco, where the product that was sold on an infomercial then starts to move upmarket because they've already gotten a lot of the pull-through on that particular product. When we look at logistics and operations, this is number 5. This is the whole process of where we are physically moving the goods and inventorying them. And of course, you have to make decisions about how that's going to happen. Please don't forget to go back and reevaluate. You don't have to reevaluate every single year, but about every 3 or 4 years, you need to go back and think about, okay, does this still make sense? It's like how you run your house. When you first get married, division of labor kind of takes on, I don't know, what he can do, what she can do, what they can do, however your house is going to operate. And then sometimes 20 years you look back and go, you know what, I'm still doing this and he's still doing that, and it kind of doesn't make sense anymore. Reevaluate and reevaluate well. How are you logistically going to transport it? The 6th thing has to do with the time frame. Always think about your channels of distribution in terms of a time frame, and this actually has 2 dimensions. It has a short-term immediate effect. Like, what is the time frame from the first input, when the first components or materials come in to make that product, until it goes to the final consumer? Do you remember when we talked about ketchup and I said to you, It's a shelf life issue. And they couldn't, for the longest time, put it in a plastic bottle because it had a very long shelf life. And probably many of you were a bit surprised at, well, yeah, it really does need 9 to 11 months guaranteed before that consumer finally finishes that bottle. The second thing is, again, how long is this channel going to operate? And go back and reevaluate. There's lots of changes in technology. There's lots of changes across the board that you might need to make. And then, of course, last but not least, just pure and simply, who is going to manage the channel? Who is controlling your logistics? You need really good people doing this. Is it somebody within the firm? Is there a person within the channel? Is this an industry in which there's a lot of government regulation and there's an agency? And as I said a couple times now, how often is it going to be renegotiated? Do not sit on the same distribution channel that you've used for the last 70 years, the last 20 years, the last 7 years, the last 20 months. The world is a dynamic marketplace, and Amazon is conquering the world. Watch out. So this is what our channel looks like. It kind of looks like, one of my students many years ago said, it's like a long piece of ziti. Yeah, it kind of is. We have the manufacturer at one end, we have the consumer at the other end. And what we need to do is look at all the intermediaries, all of these people. If they're all there, remember, as we talked about with pricing, we do often disintermediate and pull a lot of them out. But we need to look at what they do and do we need them? And how effectively are they going to operate? At the manufacturer end, we have some agents maybe, particularly if it's coming from another country. We have some wholesalers, we have some distributors, and maybe some jobbers. We don't have a lot of industries with jobbers anymore. You can read in the textbook a little bit about jobbers. Jobbers used to operate in things like books and candy. Product categories where a small vendor would need a large assortment, but they couldn't afford to buy a case of everything. They couldn't afford to buy 144 of every single candy bar. Plus, they just wouldn't keep. So you would have jobbers who would travel around to all the small vendors. That job, that position, kind of a pun there, I guess, with the advent of companies like Price Club, Costco, that has kind of gone away. In fact, that was Saul Price who started the Price Club, which eventually became part of Costco, was bought by Costco. That all kind of got rolled into a company like Costco, where you have small companies that go and buy there. If we look at how many levels there are in a channel, this is a pretty simplistic diagram, but it actually works and works pretty well. You could have a 0-level channel. Manufacturer sells direct to the consumer. There aren't a lot of channels that are that short. Probably the most common these days is manufacturer sells to a retailer. So Procter & Gamble sells to Costco, or Procter & Gamble sells to Walmart, they sell to you. Maybe you have a two-level channel. Maybe the manufacturer sells to a wholesaler. You're selling large-scale appliances or bathroom fixtures. That wholesaler sells to Home Depot or Lowe's, and they sell to you. And then sometimes you still have pretty complicated ones where you might actually have a jobber in between who's doing an intermediary function. The wholesalers still remain a pretty viable function, and they have a big task. Wholesalers, warehouses, and facilities are usually pretty far out because they take up huge amounts of space. This would be kind of a planogram of what the facility would look like and how you would have everything stored and inventoried. Again, it's gotten a lot easier with UPC codes and scanners. Here you have a situation where there's probably someone driving this and going through and picking things off the shelves. As you will see in many cases, a lot of the picking is now actually just completely automated. Maybe as we look at this channel of distribution, we look at the other end. We look at the inventory and the distribution centers. And as you read through and think about, well, what is the function of a distribution center? Basically, it is receiving the merchandise. Usually in a distribution center, it's not keeping it. An inventory center will house it for a while. A lot of grocery stores have inventory centers, but they ship that stuff out really quickly. Companies like Walmart and Costco have very, very limited distribution centers. Amazon has a lot of sort of local distribution centers. So the merchandise comes in, it's received, the UPC code is read, it may have radio frequency identifiers, it goes straight across and is cross-docked. Cross-docking has changed the way that we do business in an amazing way. And cross-docking, to a very large extent, was kind of brought to you by Walmart. We then get the merchandise, ready for the floor. Maybe we have to tag it, bag it. Maybe it comes in a big carton and we have to break it open. We prepare to ship, and off to the store it goes. There are a couple of companies that have dramatically changed the way that you and I look at the world as a consumer and as a manager. And these three are Costco, Walmart, and Amazon. And if you look at what portion of all of our markets those three control, it's pretty significant. They're not controlling them because they're stealing the markets. It's that they're pretty darn efficient. Costco, we've talked already about with pricing. Again, Costco has a huge portion of the American market, and they've kind of taught us what the real price is. Walmart has taught us huge amounts about inventory and supply chain management. They really are one of the greatest entities towards disintermediation. And nobody's better than Amazon when it comes to logistics. Excuse me. Costco controls more than 82% of the market of membership warehouse clubs. We'll look in a little while. Most of you have a hard time even figuring out who's number 2 and who's number 3. Some of you can figure out depending on where you live. There is Sam's Club. That's a small player. Sam's would as good as Sam's is and owned by Walmart, which is really good at what they do. Excuse me. They would love to be able to do what Costco does. Costco has I always find this number amazing. They have 85 million members. There are only 99.6 million households in America. Amazon is the company that has taught us about logistics originally, and they did a great job sort of marketing to us that they had this great big warehouse. And really they weren't. But Amazon, that's the greatest, biggest river in the world. However, they now have grown. They have huge warehouses. I was at one in northern New Jersey, about 2 or 3 years ago. And they had all of these systems. They had facilities like this. They had 96 buildings this size. Just think about that. Okay, within those buildings, they have Kiva. I actually tried to buy Kiva, the automatic robots here. I looked a couple of years ago to buy Kiva robots because I figured these suckers were really great, and then I realized I already owned Kiva because I own Amazon stock. They saw what Kiva could do. They bought the company. These things are absolutely amazing. It's actually kind of scary on the factory floor. Like, you cannot go within these markings. These things come with a little program. They go down the aisles. They pick a person's order, and it's very limited, the number of people that Amazon needs. Mostly they're checking once the items go in the box and that the address, the mailing address, looks like it is correct. I'm going to show you here a short scenario.
This is the largest of Amazon's distribution centers. Obviously an important day for Amazon, and really important, obviously maybe the most important part of their business next to the website itself. I mean, Amazon has 80 distribution centers, 40 in the U.S., and this is the largest of them here in Phoenix, Arizona, 1.2 million square feet. I want to visually take you through some of the things that you see just from right here, my vantage point here, up above this factory, or this distribution center, or fulfillment center, as they call it at Amazon speak. What you see behind me, those little colors back there, are row upon row upon row of all the kinds of random stuff sold by Amazon. There is no particular order to the way those things are stuffed on those shelves. They come in off of trucks as...
I'm going to stop it, but it really is an amazing concept. Remember, these guys started by mailing you books about 22 years ago. And they now are getting pretty close to owning the world. They've really kind of trained us like Pavlov's dogs. Just go on Amazon. Get Amazon Prime. All of you as a student, you can subscribe to Amazon Prime. I think it's only like $100 a year, and you get free shipping, and they ship everything really fast. But as a student, you get it for half price. Why? They want to train you to use it. So as you graduate and actually have some money and start ordering more stuff, you just can't even think about doing anything but going to Amazon. And then the third one is Walmart. And Walmart is the company that really brought us inventory and supply chain management. Sam Walton was really an expert on this. He was an efficiency expert. He was good about controlling prices, not quite as severe as Costco is. But what Walton did was he was the first company to actually buy Omnitrax. Omnitrax was a system developed by Qualcomm that would go in a truck, and then it would bounce on and off a satellite, so you would always know where your truck was. Well, Sam Walton didn't want those truckers going across America and stopping at the truck stop and staying a little too long. He wanted to know where they were. And we in San Diego, because one of our really very commendable employers is Qualcomm. The Jacobs family is a very generous family to the city of San Diego, and they've been really good to all of us at San Diego State and everywhere else. Erwin Jacobs really kind of got the start for the Qualcomm to take off the way that a company to take off the way it did, because Sam Walton bought Omnitrax. Sam was the first one to use EDI, electronic data. They were among the very first to adopt RFIDs, and they are a company that is absolutely committed to cross-docking. Couple of things that happened when they adopted RFIDs in 2003. It kind of put the whole field of supply chain management and how inventory is moved and controlled into a whole new tailspin. It's a pretty sophisticated operation. If you are Procter & Gamble, you are connected electronically to Walmart. So maybe you have it put in there that every 24 tubes of Crest toothpaste, cinnamon flavored Crest toothpaste that are sold in store number 125, when 24 tubes are sold, it automatically sends an electronic message back to Procter & Gamble, and Procter & Gamble starts queuing that up and getting it ready to put on the truck. This is a cross-docking facility for Walmart. Once again, how many people do you see? The trucks are coming in on this side. It's all getting electronically sorted, goes through the rollers. These places are crazy in terms of the noise level. And this is actually what it looks like. The trucks pull in on one side, they get unloaded, and this would be a basic cross-docking facility. Again, they're huge for Walmart as well. Trucks will pull in, stuff is offloaded, and they start preparing it. And the reason that these things kind of look the way they do is a small amount of it will go into inventory, but most of it is getting loaded and sorted to go on the next truck. I think this one, hopefully this one will kind of explain to you. This is Johnson & Johnson's truck coming in. This is Kraft's truck coming in, Procter & Gamble's truck, and Mattel. And all of it is already coded. So it comes in to the cross-docking center, and it's picked and sorted. You can see this truck might be going to Phoenix, Arizona. So it has, what is this? 3/10 of it is Mattel stuff, 3/10 of it is P&G stuff, 2/10 is Kraft, and 2/10 is Johnson & Johnson. And these trucks, as soon as they're loaded, out they go. And that is how cross-docking works. And once again, it's those three companies, Price Club for pricing and some pretty good efficiency and great cheap hot dogs and pizza. Amazon in terms of logistics, and Walmart in terms of inventory control. They have truly, truly changed the way in which you and I do business.